Hey guys, how are you? I'm going to wait a couple of minutes and give people time to hop on. I say every week, if nobody hops on, I'm going to record it anyway because I always send it out via email as well. So if you registered for this webinar, you'll get the email with the recording and some of the resources. I'll also send it out to my email list and post it on the website as well. So while we wait, just a couple of minutes, I'm going to go ahead and put the website up so you guys can visit. This is where I post each week the webinars that I'm going to be doing. I usually post at the last minute. I'm just going to be honest because that's how I roll. I post each week the webinar that I'm going to be doing, as well as just things that are coming up. And, I do so much through my website. So I'm going to put that there, and you guys can always check that website out to find upcoming webinars. Past webinars are always posted there. So if you've missed some and you want to go back and watch, you can always visit that website to do so. I try to house it all in one place so that it's easy to find and easy to access. A few people are hopping on now, so I am going to go ahead and get started here in about 2 minutes. I want to say, if you're joining me, I always love to hear where you're from and what you do. So if you'll, in the comments, just maybe share your name, where you're from, what you do, that would be awesome. One of my favorite things about doing these webinars is just getting to know people and just building this community of educators who are trying to find meaning in the mess and trying to figure it all out together. And I absolutely love getting to connect with you guys and learn with you and from you. So the best way to do that is for you guys to interact in the comments. So if you will tell me again who you are, where you're from, what you do in the comments, that would be awesome. I would love to see those. And we're going to get started in just a couple of minutes. Hey, Denise. Denise is close by in Texas. It's so good to see you here. I'm looking forward to chatting with you soon for sure. Hey, Leslie. Excited that you're here as well. Few people are sharing. If you're just hopping in, if you'll introduce yourself, I'd absolutely love that, just so I kind of know, and it helps me kind of speak to what you need as well. In Cyprus, very cool. 5th grade math and science. That's what I taught for a long time, Leslie, was 5th grade math and science. So that's awesome. Lena, how are you? I'm so excited to see you here. Lena is one of my closest friends. Very cool that you're here. I love that you come all the time. Awesome. Makes me super nervous for people to be on that I know, but I'm glad that you're here. Sally from Rockford, super excited that you're here as well. And Nicole from Spring, Texas. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started because I have a lot to share, and I know you guys have a lot to do, so I don't want to keep you too late. But I do have a lot to talk about as far as blended learning goes. There's so many things that we don't know right now. And I say that every week, but it's just the truth, right? So many things are up in the air. We're not sure what next year is going to look like. If you do know what next year is going to look like, congratulations, you're ahead of most of us. Hey, Lisa, how are you? Excited that you're here as well. But as we kind of start thinking through, there are some things that we can be, there are situations in which we can be proactive. I always say, because of the situation that we kind of found ourselves in, we had to be reactive because it almost happened overnight. But now we have kind of this little pause in the summer. And I know we're all still so busy and there's still so much to be done, but we do kind of have this kind of moment to really realize, okay, what went well in remote learning, what didn't go well, and how are we going to use what we've learned moving forward? And I think if there's anything that we do know about next year, I think we do know that we are going to have to design experiences that will work regardless of where our students are learning. I think no matter how the school year starts, none of us know what that's going to look like moving forward, or if there's going to come a time when they have to learn from home again. I hope that's not the case. But do we need to be prepared for that? And can we be proactive because of what we know now? Absolutely. So as we go through, I want to do what I always do, and that's talk about some big ideas and kind of say the things that need to be said, and then really dive into some practical things about blended learning that you can walk away with and start using as you kind of prepare and start to think about next year. And regardless of what you know or don't know, there are some things we can begin to think through now as we start to move forward. So I'm going to share my screen with you guys. And we're going to go through, I've started doing slides now just so I can stay on track. I like to talk and I like to get off track sometimes. So this just kind of helps me honor your time and go through the things that I want to make sure that I say. First of all, here's my contact information. If you want to reach out at all, you can follow me on Twitter at McNairAN3. My website is andymcnair.com. And then you can always email me at mcnairandy@gmail.com. All right. We got all the fun stuff out of the way. So here's the plan. Here's what we're going to talk about. I always read the comments that you guys read when you sign up for the webinar. So a lot of people said that they just wanted to kind of a reminder of what blended learning is. It's one of those buzzwords in education that we say often, and sometimes we forget what the real meaning of it is, right? Like, what is it actually? How do we do it? And then we're going to talk about why is blended learning important and why is it such a huge conversation right now? How can we use what we know about this to think about the things that we don't know? And then finally, we're going to talk about the practical making blended learning work. And I'm going to give you guys a really cool resource, or I think it's cool, a really cool resource to kind of think about and consider as we move forward. Okay, before I say anything else, I want to say, and I know I say this all the time, but it still has to be meaningful. Regardless of what happens or what learning looks like, it has to be meaningful or it's a waste of time. I've always said, if what you're doing in the classroom isn't meaningful for your learners, it's a waste of your time and theirs. And whether it is something that we are sending from home or whether it is something that we are, whatever we're doing, however we're doing that, I think it's important for us to really consider, what does this look like, but also how is it meaningful? And if it's not meaningful, how can we make it meaningful so that our learners feel connected to it? Because the reality is, if this generation of kids, if they don't feel connected to what they're learning, then it is a waste of time because they're just not willing to play the game. And if we thought that was the case before, you can only imagine how much more that's going to be the case when they come back from this experience that they've had of being in charge of their own learning and really them deciding when they learn, where they learn, how they learn, and even if they learn. So something to really consider and always ask yourself is it meaningful? And if you can't figure out why it's meaningful, don't expect them to be able to figure it out because it just unfortunately doesn't work that way. All right. What is blended learning? So I took this definition from a couple of resources. I'm a huge fan of Raise Your Hand Texas. They have some great resources. It's a great website. Also, Blended Learning in Action is a great book by Catlin Tucker and a couple of other authors who have done amazing work just around the idea of blended learning. It's a super easy read. So if you're just kind of wanting to stick your toe in the water and figure out what all of this is, that is a great place to start. Okay, so what is blended learning? Well, it refers to the blend of online learning and the learning that happens in school. So almost like not almost, it is a mix of online and face-to-face learning. And it doesn't really matter what that mix looks like. If you are using digital and non-digital teaching strategies, learning methods, whatever you want to call them, that is blended learning. One of the things that we're going to talk about is being really intentional about that and what that looks like and how you put those pieces together. This little thing up in the corner is driving me crazy. There we go. Also, blended learning gives the learner some control over path, place, pace, and time. So they get to kind of decide how they learn it, the pace they learn it at, where they learn, those types of things. And you can move those pieces around. And that's one of my favorite things about blended learning is that there's so much flexibility. And next year or this coming year, when we kind of return to the classroom or whatever that looks like, if it's a hybrid classroom where they're there sometimes and they're not others, but the learning still has to continue, flexibility is going to be key. We are going to have to find ways to be flexible. So why don't you guys tell me really quickly in the comments, what is your experience with blended learning? Have you done blended learning before? Is it something that's brand new to you? Chances are, if you're in the classroom, even if you didn't call it blended learning, if you have done some face-to-face teaching and you've also done some learning for your learners, prepared some learning for your students that has happened online, then that was blended learning. So tell me in the comments really quickly, kind of your experience, where you are with blended learning, and maybe what you would like to know moving forward. I'm going to give you guys just a second, and everybody who knows me knows I have terrible wait time, but I'm going to wait just a second and see if some of these comments come in. Hey, Carrie from Irving, Leanne, I'm so excited that you're here. So good to see you guys. Lisa said pretty much just thrown into it. And that was so many educators, right? Like you didn't have a choice but for blended learning to be a priority when the remote learning experience began to be our reality. There were things we had to do, and it almost became not even blended. So much of it was digital. It was full on emergency remote learning. It wasn't even something that we were prepared for. That's something that I think teachers have to understand is whatever you did was enough, because there were no best practices in place for emergency remote learning. That research hadn't been done. Who would have expected us to be in this place? Not very many. Okay, so I'm trying to read some of these comments. You guys did it, but it was hard being a rural district with bad internet. That is such a great point, and something that we have to consider, right? We have to have that equity conversation of, if they don't have access or they can't get connected, what does that look like, and how do we deal with that moving forward? Such great points. Corey Camp is here. How are you, Corey? She does so much work with blended learning, so you guys definitely need to connect with her. Let's see. Very little. Lena said it has to be relevant and meaningful. Preach. I could not agree more. So true. And so a lot of people have said they were just thrown into it. And now it's time to really figure out, what does it look like and what can it look like for my learners next year? And again, we were reactive because we had to be, but now what does it look like to be proactive? Leanne, looks like you guys were a little more prepared than others. That's very cool. All right, great points you guys are making. So you guys keep chatting in the chat. I love to see that. Feel free to chat with each other. I'm going to go ahead and move on just so I can get through this and not keep you guys too late. Okay, so I happen to think that blended learning works best when these three things are a priority. Number one, it's student driven. And I think that's something we figured out really quickly in this experience that we've just had, is our kids, or a lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them have no idea how to drive their own learning, right? They have no idea how to be responsible for learning content without somebody standing over them and telling them, hey, here's what you need to do. Here's how you need to do it. Here's when I want you to turn it in. They've always thought those things because that's how we've played the school game. But now all of a sudden, everything has changed, and they have to be given that opportunity to drive their own learning, but they have to learn what that looks like. I think blended learning has to be intentional. I talk a lot about meaningful technology. I think so often we in education have used technology because it's cool, or because it's, something that we're told to do or we're asked to do. And I think we have to get to this place to where we really begin to think about, what does meaningful technology look like? And how am I intentional enough with what I use in my classroom that it makes sense for the experience that I've designed? And I always say there's three things that I think you really need to think about when you're using technology. And I apologize because I share these often, but some people are on for the first time. So when you're considering technology, I think you need to ask yourself, is it going to engage and empower my learners? Is it going to help them make connections? And is it going to deepen their understanding? And if it's going to do one, two, or all of those things, go for it. But if it's not, then don't use technology just for the sake of using it. Be intentional about its use and know, hey, I'm using this piece of technology because it's going to deepen their understanding and help them do this. I'm using this technology because it's going to engage and empower my learners. really be intentional about thinking through that, because learning new technology is not easy. But when you use it just for the sake of using it and it doesn't seem authentic, that's just a waste of your time and theirs, and there's no sense in doing it. So definitely something to think through. And then finally, blended learning has to not only be manageable, but it also has to be meaningful. And if there's anything I hope to give you tonight, it's really thinking through those two pieces. How do I design an experience that is both manageable for me as the educator? Because if it's not that, you're not going to continue to do it. And how do I also make sure that the blended learning experience is meaningful for my learners? Because if it's not that, it's a waste of time. And so all of these pieces have to be in place, I think, for blended learning to be beneficial and for it to really work. I've given that analogy so many times of the seesaw and us having to give up some control. And when the remote learning experience happened, we were really, as educators, kind of like dangling up here in the air while our students had control. And we were waiting for for some of that control to be given back. And the great part of that analogy is that with a seesaw, it's really the most fun when it's a give and take, right? When sometimes you have control, sometimes they have control, and that's what blended learning should be, right? It should be that give and take. But more than anything, it has to be intentional, it has to be meaningful, and it has to be manageable. So we're going to talk through, and I promise you that I'm not going to promise, because that's a big promise. I'm going to say, I hope that by the end of this webinar, you're going to have some aha moments of, oh my gosh, that makes sense. That's something I can do. And not only can I do it, but I can do it in a way that is really personalized for my learners and will make sense for my class and for me as an educator. All right, ticking right along. I have to go back and forth between screens, which makes me nervous. All right, so as we think about next year, one of the things that I hope that a lot of our kids learned during this remote learning experience is that learning happens everywhere. I can learn in the kitchen. I can learn on a walk with my family. I can learn playing board games. I can learn playing video games, right? You think about the connections that they can make, storytelling, cause and effect, the math that is involved, pixels, all of that stuff. So many opportunities to see learning and to see the things that they learn in the classroom beyond the walls of the classroom. And I think that when we think about blended learning, that's going to have to be the mindset that we have. It'll be important that we design experiences that will result in learning regardless of where it happens. You know, it stresses me out just a little bit. I'm not going to lie. It stresses me out just a little bit to hear people talk about how there's going to be school choice. And there are going to be some kids who are allowed to learn from home. And there are going to be some kids who will come to school and learn. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I'm not suggesting that that's not the answer, because I don't have the answers. But what I am going to say, and I'm just going to be honest about this, is that I don't think we can expect teachers to design one experience for home and one experience for school. We are going to have to figure out how to design experiences that will work, that will be meaningful, that will give our students those opportunities to make those connections, regardless of where the learning happens. Our mindsets are going to have to shift from writing these lesson plans that our students sit and do in our classrooms to really designing experiences that can happen anywhere. The goal is that the learning happens. And if we really believe that learning happens everywhere, and spoiler alert, it does, if we really believe that, what does it look like to design those experiences, and how do we move forward with that? Corey, I love that point, that the tech must be intentional. And I'm reading through your comment. Yes, such good stuff. It doesn't, regardless of whether it's synchronous or asynchronous, it has to be intentional. I love that. All right, so I wanted to get that out of the way right out of the gate. Learning happens everywhere. And now let's talk about really what this could look like. Now, this is going to look familiar, and I know that because it is kind of how I've always said that I think it's kind of what I've always thought learning should look like, and designing those experiences. I wanted to let you guys know that I've updated this and made it look a little bit different, and I just kind of want to walk you through it. And I know some of you have heard this, but hang with me because I want to talk about what it looks like in a blended learning model. These three pieces, this whole engage, experience, and empower, the 3 E's, it makes so much sense, right? To engage our learners as soon as they walk into the classroom or as soon as they dive into an online experience, to get to that willingness to invest. Because without that willingness to invest, you can forget about it. Who would, right? I mean, if you can't hook me or get me interested in whatever it is that we're about to learn, I'm out. And that's just the case. Unfortunately, we can say all we want. I'm going to teach it the way I'm going to teach it, and they're going to have to learn it. It's not how we play the game anymore. They're just not willing to do that, partly because they have access to the world. And when you have access to the world, that's kind of a game changer. So getting to that willingness to invest is really important. We're going to talk about that. The next piece is that experience, that opportunity to learn. What is that going to look like? And is this going to be the face-to-face portion? Is this something I can do in small groups? Is this something I can do in a mini lesson? Or is this something I'm going to deliver through video on Flipgrid? How am I going to provide that opportunity to really kind of experience the content and have that opportunity to learn? And then finally, that empower piece. So how do I take what I've learned and actually do something with it? What does it look like to take this learning beyond the walls of the classroom and use it? Because when I can do that, when I can apply it, when it really makes sense, all of a sudden it becomes real and it becomes something that I understand, not something that I've learned. I've learned it, but if I don't ever get to that understand piece, what was the point? Right? So that engage, experience, empower, the willingness to invest, the opportunity to learn, and then making connections, those are huge. Now, here's the exciting part. I've added 2 new pieces because of a few conversations I've had. First of all, I talk about something all the time called designing for depth. And that's not a new concept. So many people talk about that. We have depth of knowledge, all of those different things that we can consider. We have depth and complexity icons. But I think that, I'm a gifted and talented specialist at ESC Region 12, as well as a digital innovation specialist. So I'm a big believer in thinking about those kids. First of all, I'm a big believer in thinking about all kids when you're designing an experience. But if we're going to think about all kids, we have to think about our gifted learners or our high achievers or just the kids who already understand whatever it is that we're teaching. Now, when we think about a blended learning experience, or we think about, hey, what does this look like when I have kids learning from home and kids learning in my classroom, that could get a little stressful if we do what we have done in the past. And I'm not saying that everybody does this. I'm saying that this is for a long time as a traditional teacher, what I did. I hate to admit this, but I'm just going to be honest because that's what I do. I, for a long time, would write my lesson plan. I didn't call it experiences back then. I wrote my lesson plan, and then I would realize, oh my gosh, this kid already not only knows this, but they could teach it themselves. And then I would struggle to hurry up and find something for them to do. And I would give them the most meaningless work, like, hey, here's the enrichment form of the worksheet, or hey, why don't you work on this project or go to this website? And that's not a bad idea if it's meaningful. But unfortunately, sometimes what I was giving them was not meaningful. So I think that when you're designing a blended learning experience, it helps to think through that enrichment piece before it's even needed, right? What am I going to do for the kids who already understand the content? What are they going to do? How am I going to give them an opportunity to dive deeper? One of the analogies that I give all the time is that when we think about the different learners that we have in our classroom, I oftentimes think about a scuba diving trip. And I'm not sure why, because I've never been scuba diving. I don't know that I'll ever do that. But I would imagine that when you are taken out to the ocean, as part of that experience, if you had never been scuba diving before, you would be really nervous, right? So let's just say that you're super nervous, and there's two types of people on the boat, right? There's people that have been scuba diving, and there's people that have never been scuba diving. And the instructor comes out and he goes, okay, we're all going to jump in. Everybody get your stuff on and let's go. Well, two things are going to happen. Either you're going to say, hey, I don't know how to scuba dive, and I don't really have the tools to do that. I don't know what this looks like, but I'm not jumping in that deep water because I don't know what's down there and I'm not prepared. Oftentimes, that's how our struggling learners feel. And we're going to talk about them in just a second. But our gifted learners often feel like, so let's say somebody says, hey, I'm struggling. I'm really nervous about doing that. What if the instructor said, oh, we have somebody on the boat who doesn't know how to do this? All right, well, we've got to cancel the whole trip. We ever turn the boat around. Let's go back. How would you feel as somebody who was an experienced scuba diver and knew and not only did you know how to do it, you were super stoked about it. The reality is you'd be really frustrated. But when we think about the other side of that, the person who says, hey, I don't know how to scuba dive. I'm not sure what that looks like. When we think about that person, if the instructor says, oh my gosh, you don't know how to scuba dive? All right, we got to turn this boat around. We got to drop this one off of the shore. What if he said, you know what, you need to just wait here. I'm going to go ahead and take these other guys back out and they're going to get to experience the ocean. I'm sorry, you don't know how. You're going to miss out on so many cool things, but we'll be back. We'll pick you up when this is over. How would you feel? You guys tell me in the chat, how would you feel if that was the case? I'm gonna wait just a second. I'm gonna read through your comments while you answer that. How would you feel if you were the person that caused them to turn the boat around and they told you you just had to sit on the shore while everybody else experienced the ocean? These are great comments. I love this conversation. All right, guys, not all at once. I'm kidding. How would you feel if you had to just wait for everybody else and didn't get to experience the ocean? Sally, absolutely. You would feel left out, right? And you would be sad that you weren't getting to experience the ocean. So I think that's the other side of this. We do have to think about our gifted learners, I love it, Leanne. I'd be mad. I'd be mad too. So when we think about our kids who struggle, oftentimes that's how they feel. Wait, what? These kids get to pursue their passion while I have to sit here at the U-shaped table with you and do a worksheet? Like, that's not okay. But if the instructor said, and I know some of you have heard me give this analogy before, but if the instructor said, you know what? I realize that you're not ready to go deep. And you're right, you don't have the tools. And I would never throw you into those deep waters without some experience. But oh my gosh, you absolutely deserve the opportunity to experience the ocean. And so while you're not ready to go deep and you're not ready to scuba dive, I do want you to snorkel. And I want you to stay right up here on the surface until you're ready. But we're going to get to a place where you can go deep. I promise you that. We're just not there yet, right? That's growth mindset. We're not there yet, but it's coming. That is how we should support our struggling learners. And I don't care whether it's blended or if it's in the classroom, we have to stop feeling like it is always tutoring or it's always help or it's always even sometimes calling it extra support. Sometimes that's difficult for them because they don't understand why they need the extra support and others don't. Why do these kids get to go do something really cool while I'm stuck here sitting in the sand waiting for you guys? But instead, if we consider that encouragement, right? Those kids just need that extra piece of encouragement. And we think, how will I support learners that need extra support in order to understand what is being learned? All of a sudden, there is a reason that that's in place. And I love the one of the definitions of encouragement. I was trying to Google it real quick because I forgot to do it before I hopped on. The act of trying to stimulate the development of an activity, state, or belief. And that's what we're doing when we're supporting our learners or we're giving them extra help. We're trying to stimulate that willingness, that want to, that understanding that they can. And so with this, when we think this out, this whole, how am I going to get to that willingness to invest? How am I going to give them an opportunity to learn? And how will I help them make connections? We also have to consider, how am I going to provide that opportunity to go deeper? And how am I going to provide the encouragement for those students who need the extra support? Because there's nothing wrong with either. But when it becomes really overwhelming and when we get frustrated with those kids is when we haven't thought through that from the beginning. So when you're designing a blended learning experience, don't just design the experience. Be intentional about knowing, I'm going to have kids who already know this. I'm going to have kids who aren't going to have a clue what I'm talking about. And then I'm going to have kids who the experience is going to be enough for them. But I have to be proactive in thinking about all of those sets so that everybody gets to experience the ocean, right? So that it's meaningful for everyone. This is what I'm talking about when I said it is important to be intentional when you design a meaningful learning experience. So when you think about designing your blended learning experiences, and I'm going to give you guys this resource, I've created this and I kind of just redid the original template. Sorry, the word wasn't coming. And this is the new template. So this is a slide. It's free. You're welcome to access it. Do whatever you want to with it. But I really don't think it's a bad idea for us to consider when we go back into the classroom, designing weekly experiences, right? And thinking through, what does it look like for me to cover several standards in one experience? Now, on the template, there's a form for weekly blended learning experiences and daily. So if you want to do daily blended learning experiences, there's nothing wrong with that. But I think that as we find out we have to support our learners at home and at school, they're going to require a lot of feedback. They're going to require a lot of support. There's going to be a lot of mini lessons going on, a lot of connecting in small groups, whether that be virtually or in the classroom. And in order to make time for that, I think we're going to have to really plan well. And anybody watching this who knows me is like, did you really just say people need to plan well? Because I'm not a great planner. But I think about when we move forward, and if we're going to be proactive about this, designing this experience this way, I think could solve a lot of problems up front. So if I think through my engage piece, what is my experience piece? How am I going to encourage those connections? What will I do for my kids who are ready to dive deeper? How will I encourage those kids who need extra support? And then you see at the bottom, I've listed those life-ready skills that I won't shut up about because they're so important. Collaboration, communication, creativity, critical thinking, reflection, and kindness. How can I weave those into the experience? And then how can I weave in the social emotional learning as well? And on the website, I give credit, those social emotional learning skills are from CASEL, CASEL.org. How can I weave those in as well so that we know that all of these pieces are important? The standards are important. Whatever it is that I've designed is important. But how do I weave that all together into one experience that makes sense? Do you guys see the intentionality in that? Like how important it is and how easy it is to think through all of those pieces up front so that you're not caught off guard. And it's not frustrating when you have that kid who says 5 minutes into the experience, I'm done, I'm finished, what do I do now? When you've already thought through that, it's like, you know what, here you go. And that is just so super powerful. So somebody's asking, Denise is asking, what's the website? I'm going to give that to you guys now. It's just bit.ly/DMLE. That stands for Designing Meaningful Learning Experiences 2020. And so that resource, I even included in there, and I've said this before, but I've included in there an example of something that I designed for my daughter. It's a weekly experience. Remember, it can be weekly or daily. But I just looked at her standards from that bird's eye view, right? I really looked at them to see what the connections are, what made sense to go together, what can I kind of weave together in a weekly experience where she was practicing all of the skills and all of the concepts that I needed her to learn. And then thinking about the gaps that we have to fill in, what are the extra supports that I need to provide? There was an enrichment piece. So you guys can check that out on that website. I'll put it in the comments as well. Thank you, Sally. I have positive energy right now because I just drank a Dr. Pepper. It's always a good idea to have a little caffeine, for sure. Okay, so I put that in the chat so you guys can check it out. But it just makes sense to me. I don't know if it makes sense to anybody else, but it helps me to think through it that way. And I like to really think about that, designing an experience with all of those pieces in mind. So then when you're in a training and somebody says, hey, you guys have to be teaching these life ready skills. You got to do the 4 C's, or all right, now you've got to do social emotional skills. That's not overwhelming, because you know what? I've been doing that all along. I'm weaving it into the experiences I design. It's not something separate. It's not something that I have to go and do or make extra time for. It's just woven right into that experience. Okay, so I'm reading comments. Yes, such a great point. It's definitely a work in progress, Lena, for sure. All right, so I didn't want to leave without giving you guys some practical tools, so I want to do that. And I know if you hear me share often, you're like, I swear if she talks about Flipgrid anymore. But I'm telling you guys, if I was in the classroom right now, and I tell this to so many teachers, Flipgrid for me would be it for this experience that we have had, and even moving forward. I think it is such a great place to design experiences and to give your kids all of the things that they need in order for an experience to make sense. So I want to show you really quickly kind of what that looks like. Let me go back to my StreamYard, and I'm going to stop sharing for just a second. And I'm going to actually share one more time, and I'm going to go to Flipgrid. Don't leave yet. Be patient. I'm going to show you guys some cool stuff. Okay, so you can see these are my grids on Flipgrid. And if you've never used Flipgrid before, it is a place for your students to share video reflections or their thoughts on video, to interact with content, but they respond with a video response. But here's what's great about Flipgrid. When you create a grid, let me see if I can find my daughter's. Okay, this is the one I created for my daughter. You can see I have all of the pieces: engage, experience, empower, enrichment, and then also a help grid for if they need help, if they have questions, whatever that looks like. So it's all in one place, which to me makes so much sense. I'm not trying to put everything in different places. You could set this up in Google Classroom. You could set this up in Wakelet. There's lots of different ways you could do this. But that being said, when you go here, you can see that I have the topic resource, or the topic focus is here. So that would be the piece that they have to do. Now, when you go down here, you can see that I added some additional things as well. So not only is there the topic focus or whatever it is she needs to do, she also has these other pieces at the bottom. Oh, you guys can't see this, can you? Are you telling me that in the deal and I just can't? Oh yeah, you can't see it. Okay, perfect. You can see these 3 wonders from Wonderopolis that I gave her. So that's where I brought in some choice. She's still going to practice reading comprehension. She's going to learn some new vocabulary, but she got to choose. And that's one of my favorite things about Flipgrid, is that you can add, let me show you really quickly how I did that. You can add these additional topic attachments. So you can add up to 9 topic attachments, which is very, very cool. So not only do you have your topic focus and what you want them to do, but you can also add these additional resources and provide some choice in that as well. And then you have documentation of their learning, right? As they share their videos and they get feedback from their peers or whatever that looks like, you have documentation of their learning, which I think is very, very cool. Another resource that I want to make sure that I share is, let me stop sharing. And then I am going to, sometimes this gets a little tricky. Don't leave. This is cool. You want to see it. Trust me. This is Slides Mania. So if you've seen Slides Mania, this is something that is sort of new. I mean, it's been around for a while, but man, whoever has created Slides Mania is killing it right now with sharing tons of great content for educators. So let me show you exactly what I mean by that. When you go to Slides Mania and you go to education, there's all of these different pieces, weekly planners. You could probably design your own planner there if you don't want to use mine. But the choice boards and the games are very, very cool and such a great way to create digital choice boards. And so I know, Denise, we've talked about these, but check out all of these different options. So you can do file cabinets, which I don't know if kids would think file cabinet. They'd probably be like, what the heck is a file cabinet? But you can do these treasure chests. There is a digital board game where you can design experiences on each piece. So, and then there's a challenge board. I was sharing this one earlier today. This is a great place for students to start because it's super easy. Like you could tell your kids, hey, you have to pick an even number and an odd number and do both of those experiences. But she already has it set up so that when you click on tile 1, you're going to go to that experience, and you could design that experience here to share with them. You could link that back to Flipgrid. There's just so many different ways that you can use her resources or his resources. I don't know who created this. Here's a cinema choice board, but you can see how cool this is and that they're already created for you. I am all about using things that are free and using things that have already been created rather than trying to reinvent the wheel. So what do you guys think? Tell me in the comments real quick. What do you guys think about Slides Mania? Is that something you could use? Is that new? I know I've talked about it before and lots of people are talking about it right now. But what do you think about choice boards and using them as a piece to your blended learning experiences that you design? I'm going to take a breather and let you guys respond. Oh, Leslie, I always love to be the first person to tell somebody something. It always makes me so happy when somebody says, I haven't heard of that before. Very cool, Denise. I'm telling you, choice boards are powerful, and digital choice boards are really cool because you have the ability to weave them into a blended learning experience. Yes, Lena, definitely play around with it. And it is student driven, right? They're getting to choose, hey, what is it that I'm going to do? But you also have you also remember the seesaw, right? Back and forth, back and forth. Your part is designing the different experiences, right? And being intentional about that and thinking through. And then you are giving them some control as they choose, hey, what is it that I want to learn, or what direction do I want to go with this board? Yeah, Lisa, I agree. This could save you some steps. And I'm all about saving teacher steps. You guys have your plates full. You don't need anything extra. So very cool. All right, Sally. Well, this will definitely jazz it up, I hope. So definitely check out Slides Mania. Again, click on education. Check out all of the resources, but for sure, check out the choice boards because super cool, super meaningful, and really intentional, right? And that's what I'm talking about. You know, when we talk about it being manageable and meaningful, between the 3 E's learning template and thinking through those pieces and using things like this, that is what makes it manageable for you, right? And if you don't think through these pieces, it's not going to be manageable and you're not going to want to do it. I tell people that all the time when they're talking to me about their teachers or whatever, and they'll say, you know, I really want them to do this, and I'm just trying to get them to move forward on it. I always say, well, do they know how to manage it? Because if that management piece is missing, nobody wants to do it, right? It seems overwhelming. It's too much, and we already have our plates full. And so thinking through that management piece is just as important as thinking through the whole being meaningful. Teachers need to collaborate on creating the boards. We need to encourage. Yes, I love that. Creating the boards and then sharing out what you've created. Such a great idea. And I love that. And always giving credit to Slides Mania to just doing an amazing job, and not only doing an amazing job, but putting it out there for teachers to use at absolutely no cost. I'm a super fan for sure. Very, very cool. So I'm going to stop screen sharing. Sorry, I always have to, y'all are like, you don't really have to give us a play-by-play of what you're doing, but I do, because that is what keeps me on track and helps me know what I'm doing. All right, the last resource that I want to share is this blended learning universe. I don't know if you guys have seen this, but this is from the Christensen Institute, who we all know are, you know, blended learning and Christensen Institute, just those two things go together. Blended Learning Universe is a great resource. And let me just kind of show you a couple of things before we hop off. When you go to this resource, let me see if I can. I absolutely love how they walk you through the basics of blended learning. So, we didn't go through all of the different pieces of blended learning. I wanted to focus on how to make it manageable and meaningful first. And then maybe in some later webinars, we'll go through some of these other pieces. But I also wanted to give you guys this resource because these are the different types of blended learning. So these are the models. Now, here's what's awesome about the Christensen Institute is when you scroll down, words are not coming out well. When you, or actually, I guess you click on them earlier. I thought I scrolled down. You can actually go through each one of these pieces. So station rotation, here's a video of what it looks like, and here's the model in action. Lab rotation, individual rotation, flipped classroom, so that I can really get to know what each one of these models look like so that I can consider which ones I want to use in my classroom. I absolutely love that not only do they show you a video, they show you what that model looks like in action, and they walk you through every single model. I just think that's awesome, very cool, very easy to access. And then they even go through to help you figure out these different pieces. So as you kind of scroll over these different things, they give you some ideas and some thoughts. There's research. If you're one of those people who like to know, does this work? Spoiler alert, it does. How do I use it? What does this look like? Just so many great things. So Blended Learning Universe, definitely something you might want to access, maybe something you want to share with your administration. Just a really, really cool resource for sure. Could you guys see what I was sharing just then? I don't know if you could. If you can't, hopefully you were able to see that. If not, you can go to the website. And here's what I'm going to do. If you registered for this webinar, I'm going to send you all of the slides, and those will be linked, so you can click on them and go straight to them if that makes sense. Okay, let me get back to my presentation, and I want to say a couple of other things before we hop off. We're almost done, I promise you that. I got to go watch Amazing Race. Can I just say that I've told anybody that will listen, Amazing Race every single season is on Prime Video right now, and I'm a huge fan of Amazing Race right now. My poor husband, I have made him watch every single episode, every single season from season 1. Oh, good, Lisa. I'm glad you opened the tab and followed along. Sorry, I don't know what happened. It wasn't going with me, but that's okay. All right, let me get back here so that I can finish up. I want to make sure that you guys know, first of all, how much the work that you're doing is appreciated. I know that it is so difficult to be in a time where there are so many things that are unknown. But if we use what we know, right, to address what we don't know, I think that we're going to be able to figure this out. And I think that, there's a lot of obstacles right now, but it's an exciting time to be an educator because there are so many things that we're going to be able to do and move on as a result of this experience. I always say it was an obstacle for sure, but it's also an opportunity for us to shift and think about, how do we give our learners that opportunity to drive their own learning? How do we collaborate between home and school? And how do we continue that even after this is over? And what does it look like to really design meaningful learning experiences that will engage and empower my learners, right? So I really hope that this was helpful. I hope you got some things that you can use and that you can implement immediately this summer as you're kind of thinking through what this is going to look like. I have some really exciting stuff coming up this summer, lots of opportunities to dive deeper into designing experiences, specifically designing meaningful blended experiences. So if that's something you're interested in, make sure you stay tuned. And you can stay tuned by checking out my website, andymcnair.com. Subscribe because I don't email often, y'all. I'm not the most organized person, but I email about once a week, sometimes once every other week. And I share out the webinars, I share out resources. And like I said, there's some exciting things coming up very soon that I hope you'll want to be a part of. I can't say it enough. I appreciate you guys so much. And the Meaningful Mess community means so much to me. We are at some point, if we're not already, going to find meaning in this mess. It is a mess, but we're going to find meaning in it. And I think doing so together just makes me so happy. And I'm just so thankful for each one of you and all that you do in your classrooms with your learners or on your campus with your teachers, if you're an administrator, whatever that looks like. So thank you so much. You guys have a great evening. If you have questions, feel free to send them my way. If you want to hop on a Zoom call and chat about some of this stuff, I'm happy to do so. You guys just have to let me know. So get some rest. Enjoy. Watch Amazing Race tonight. It's a good idea. It's a really good show. All right. I will talk to you guys soon. Reach out if you need anything at all. Bye, y'all.